All praises to the Most High. Brothers and sisters, I'm your host, the Apostle Reuben of IUPR Bible Radio, podcasting out of Little Rock, Arkansas, to the true saints of the Most High God. Well, brothers and sisters, we're at Romans 14:23. Now, before I read it, I want to go to 1 John 3 and 4. First John 3 and 4, because these Christians, brothers and sisters, they think they can use verse for verse, like they're battling us with this book. And in the end, they're going to embarrass themselves. It's the egg is going to be on their face, because it's a simple thing they're trying to do. What they're trying to do, brothers and sisters, is redefine the words of the Bible. Because when we look at this, whosoever committeth sin transgresseth also the law. For sin is transgression of the law. So anytime, brothers and sisters, you look out at these ignorant pastors, when they keep Sunday church, they're transgressing God's law. That's what they're doing. The book notes them as transgressors of the law. That's what it notes them. They don't keep the feast of God, of the Bible, like the Passover, unleavened bread. They don't keep the new moons. We know they don't keep the Sabbaths. So, knowing that they do this, brothers and sisters, someone had to come up with a doctrine. All of these doctrines are thought up and pushed out. And there are certain types that push them out. Like, for instance, it says, whosoever committeth sin transgresseth also the law. For sin is transgression of the law. How did John know that? Let's go to the book of Psalms. See, it comes out of the Old Testament. Psalms 119, as they say, the Old Testament, the scriptures. Psalms 119, verse, real quick, 158. It says, I beheld the transgressors and was grieved. David said, I was grieved, because they kept not thy word, and the word is the law. We already know what the word is. The word, the Greek logos, is sometimes used of the Messiah Christ. The word of God is a name often given to the scriptures and the law of God. And we've proved it with John 10:35 and Acts 17:11. We've already done that. The scripture is the word, which is the law. So back up. It says, I beheld the transgressors and was grieved, because they kept not thy law. See, when you broke the law, you were a transgressor of the law. When you broke the law, you were a transgressor. John just says sin is a transgression. It's the same. Transgressor, transgression. No different. So when we go back to 1 John 3, verse 4. Whosoever committeth sin transgresseth also the law, for sin is transgression of the law. You know, brothers and sisters, have you asked yourselves, sin is the transgression of which law? Let us show you which law sin is the transgression of. The book of James 2:11. For he that said, do not commit adultery, said also, do not kill. Now if thou commit no adultery, yet if thou kill, thou art become a transgressor of the law. Which law? This one. When you break this law, you're a transgressor. It names it. This is the first commandment of all the laws. The 10 Commandments is the first commandment ever given. That's why it says in Ephesians 6, verse 2, just real quick. It says, honor thy father and mother, which is the first commandment with promise. See, the first commandment was honor thy father and thy mother. And where did they come from? Here. So let's go back up. Let's go back to Romans just real quick because this isn't going to be long. Romans chapter 14, verse 23. Now, brothers and sisters, Christians, now we got them. 1 John 3 and 4 is a heavy verse because it tells you what a transgressor of the law is, a sinner. It tells you that sin is the transgression of the law. So, since that verse had entered out into the wind, the Christians researched the verse that they could use against those that keep the law. Remember, it was, they searched for a verse. And see, it's something, brothers and sisters, when you see a verse like 1 John 3 and 4 and you run from it and try to find a verse to go against those that keep the law. That's satanic. I don't know if you see that, brothers and sisters. Anybody that sees 1 John 3 and 4, sin is transgression of the law, that's what it is. But the so-called, we telling you, the so-called, they don't care. They don't accept it. This, brothers and sisters, will always be what I put up to you. Right here. Believe us when we say these Negroes out here are researching white man theology. And this is what he put out. And so now you got all these little Negroes running around talking about whatever, not this, all this, all that. Let's read it. And he that doubteth. Now, what does it mean to doubt? Here's the definition. Now, this is a book from the 1930s, brothers and sisters. The cover totally just, I couldn't even, just words. But this was what this old dictionary had in it. Now, this is it was a children's junior Bible dictionary. Old. Stumbled upon it. Kept it. I've had that book for over 20 years. Look what it says. Doubt. Not believe. So a doubter is an unbeliever. Not sure. Feeling uncertain. Difficulty in believing. So an unbeliever. Faith casts out doubt. See, faith casts out doubt. See, this lets you know. An uncertain state of mind. That's uncertain. The fourth one is the same. Unstate. An uncertain state of mind. Now, you see that uncertain state of mind? Let us show you that in the Bible. Let's look at this in the book of Luke chapter 12. Real quick, just one verse. Luke 12:29. See, I'm showing you that this dictionary is a biblical dictionary. Watch this. Christ says in Luke 12:29, and seek not ye what ye shall eat, or what ye shall drink, neither be ye of doubtful mind. Neither be ye of doubtful mind. Doubt, what does it says again? Number 3, an uncertain state of mind. Christ said don't be like that. Do not be like that. And we can't, brothers and sisters. We got to go forward. Now, let's go back to Romans 14. I want to get this going. Romans 14:23. Now he says, he that doubteth. Now, again, I want to reiterate this. Doubt, not believe. So a doubter, one that doubts, is an unbeliever. You got to put 2 and 2 together, brothers and sisters. One that doubts is an unbeliever. So if you're a doubter, you're an unbeliever. So 2 Corinthians 6. 1 Corinthians 6. Verse 14, Paul writes, "Be ye not unequally yoked together with unbelievers." Watch what an unbeliever is. "For what fellowship hath righteousness with unrighteousness?" Pay attention to the verse. Be ye not unequally yoked together with unbelievers. Unbelievers. For what fellowship hath righteousness with unrighteousness? You're going to find out that the unbeliever is the unrighteous. Or what communion have light with darkness? So Paul is letting you know that the unbeliever is unrighteousness and darkness. An unbeliever is unrighteousness and darkness. So what is unrighteousness? 1 John 5:17. 1 John 5:17. And all, look at this, all unrighteousness is sin. There it is. All unrighteousness is sin. And there is a sin not unto death, one you can repent from. But all unrighteousness is sin. So unrighteousness is sin. So we go back to 2 Corinthians. 2 Corinthians 6. Showing you what an unbeliever is. 2 Corinthians 6:14, "Be ye not unequally yoked together with unbelievers. For what fellowship hath righteousness with unrighteousness?" Question. The unbeliever is those of unrighteousness. Unrighteousness is sin. So an unbeliever is a sinner. That's what an unbeliever is, a sinner, a transgressor of the law. An unbeliever is he that is in unrighteousness, sin. Put two and two together. What communion hath light with darkness? Real quick. What communion has light? Proverbs 6. Verse 23. For the commandment is a lamp and the law is light, and reproofs of instruction are the way of life. The law is light. What about the way of the wicked is as darkness? They know not at what they stumble. The way of the wicked. The way of the wicked. Well, who are the wicked? Who? What? Not only who the wicked are, but what is the works of the wicked? Let's look at and see what the wicked are doing. Proverbs 10:16. The labor of the righteous tendeth to life, the fruit which is the works of the wicked to sin. So the wicked are sinners. The wicked are sinners. So if the wicked's fruit is sin, when we go back down to Proverbs 4:19, the way of the sinner, wicked, is as darkness. Look at this. The way of the wicked is as darkness. The sinner. They know not at what they stumble because they can't see. So the wicked, his way is darkness. See darkness? See who's in darkness? Sinners. So when we go back You can see very quickly as we compare the words in the verse. 1 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 14. Be not unequally yoked together with unbelievers. For what fellowship hath righteousness with unrighteousness? What fellowship has the lawkeeper with the sinner? And what communion hath light which is in the law with darkness, which is where sinners are? So an unbeliever is a sinner. So when we go back to, wait a minute, Romans 14. Verse 23. And he that doubteth, he's that an unbeliever. Doubteth is an unbeliever. That, again, doubt. Believe not. So those that doubt are the unbelievers. Is damned. That's why it says is damned if he eat, because he eateth not of faith. See, so a unbeliever eateth not in faith. Now, pay attention, because what you got to understand, brothers and sisters, is when we go to John 20, John 20, 27, I think. I'll just show you this, because you see this. John 20, 27. Then said he to Thomas, reach hither thy finger, and behold my hands, and reach hither thy hands, and thrust it into my side. Be not faithless, but believing. Faith and believe is the same thing. They're interchangeable. The word faith and believe is the same. It's the same. It means the same thing. Faith and believe means the same thing, according to the book. So when we go back to Romans 14, because the Christians are trying to cook up, let's just get to it. And he that doubteth, an unbeliever, is damned if he eat, because he eateth not of faith. He eateth in unbelief, because faith and belief is the same. Now here we go. For whatsoever is not of faith is sin. So a doubter is an unbeliever, and an unbeliever is a sinner. So what Paul is saying is, he that sins is damned if he eat, because he eateth not of faith. So a sinner eateth not of faith. And we're going to prove this again. You got to know what you're reading. A doubter is an unbeliever, and an unbeliever is a sinner. You got to know what these words mean. That's why we break down the words in the verse to show you, so you can understand it clearly. And he that doubteth, remember, doubt, not believe. He's an unbeliever. Difficulty in believing. So, unbeliever. He that doubteth, which is an unbeliever, not believe, which is a sinner, is damned if he eat. Look at this. Because he eateth not of faith. See, an unbeliever does not eat with faith. A sinner does not eat with faith. For whatsoever is not of faith is sin. So whatsoever is not of faith is sin. So they say, so if it's not of faith, it's sin. But look at that. I told you, brothers and sisters, a while ago, Christians, we'll go straight to it. Matthew 23:23, woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you pay tithes of mint, anise, and cumin, and have omitted the weightier matters of the law. See, we stay here, and we're going to read it. We're going to, this is like throwing a pie in a Christian's face, because they have to, now you're going to see what loops and jumps and turns they're going to go through to try to disassociate faith from the law. See, because we prove that faith, look at this, for you pay tithes of mint and anise and cumin, and have omitted the weightier matters of the law. See that? Matters of the law, judgment, mercy, and faith. Faith was always a heavy matter of the law since the First Testament. You're going to sit here and tell us that faith is not a matter of the law. Faith is a matter of the law. It's a matter. Christ is letting you know. Now, do you believe in what the Savior says, or do you believe in what you want to when the Savior says it? Can't do that. Romans 3:27, bust it right back out. You guys can't see this and think, we know what the verses are that they skip. Just bring them out. Whereas boasting then, it is excluded. By what law? Of works? Nay, but by the law of faith. So, if there is a law of faith, pay attention. If there is a law of faith, Paul said that this law is of faith. That's why you see those three words. Nay, but by the law of faith. So we're seeing verses where faith is a matter of the law. Faith is of the law. What the Christians never wanted you to know was faith was an act of keeping the law. That's what it was. That's why it's called the law of faith. And remember, we went over this in Psalm 78. We went over this in Psalm 78:56. I think in my last podcast episode, I'm going over it again. We're going to take these verses away from these Christians over and over. Now, this is talking about the children of Israel in the wilderness. Psalm 78:56. Yet they tempted and provoked the Most High God and kept not his testimony. So, brothers and sisters, this verse is letting us know that Israel did not keep the testimonies of God. They did not keep the law. So when they broke his law, pay attention to the next verse, but turned and dealt unfaithfully. See? Unfaithfully means they had no faith. And when you look at verse 56, yet they tempted and provoked the Most High God and kept not his testimonies. They broke his laws. Instead, they turned back and dealt unfaithfully. So when they broke his laws, they were unfaithful. Unfaithful means without faith. When they broke his laws, the Christians will never read this. This is a chop. You can't accept what you want. When they broke God's law, they were unfaithful. Or I should say, counted unfaithful. Because God is counting them unfaithful. These are not my words. When they broke his laws, they were counted unfaithful, but turned back and dealt unfaithfully, like their fathers that were turned aside like a deceitful bow. You're not going to tell me that we're looking. Because they broke his laws, they were unfaithful. Think about that. Unfaithful. When they broke his laws. When they broke his laws, they were unfaithful. So going back to Matthew 23:23, this is why Christ said, This is why Christ said in Matthew 23:23, once again, woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you pay tithes of mint and anise and cumin, and have omitted the weightier matters of the law, judgment, mercy, and faith. See, faith was in the act of keeping the law. And when Israel broke that law, when they kept not his testimonies, they were unfaithful. We hope you see what we're teaching you, brothers and sisters. If you broke the commandments, you were unfaithful. Because faith is an act of keeping the law, as you can see. Faith was a matter of law. A heavy matter. And Paul agrees again in the book of Romans. These Christians are playing the game with faith. They're trying to have whatever faith they're teaching is in the white man. It's not in the God of this book, because they're showing you. Watch Paul. Where is boasting then? It is excluded. By what law? Of works? Nay, but by the law of faith. It wasn't anything going on with the works they had to boast in, but the law of faith. How can the Christians miss this law of faith? Paul is letting us know that the law is of faith. The law is of faith. Right here. So think about this. What's going on with him here? What's going on with Paul here? Because this isn't verse against verse. What's going on with Paul here? Galatians 3:12. And the law is not of faith. What's going on? He just said the law of faith, but now the Christians pull this verse. And the law is not of faith. What law is not of faith? Let's go back to Galatians 2:16 again. No, we're going to do this. Because Christians, they act like they don't see, let's keep things in context. Watch this. Galatians 3:2. This only what I learn of you, receive ye the Spirit by the works of the law or by the hearing of faith. So the works of the law or hearing of faith. So the works of the law or by the hearing of faith. So we're seeing here that it's the works of the law that's against faith. Works of the law against faith, not the law. See, this is letting you know it's two laws. Paul has been talking about two laws this whole time. Christians just try to bunch it all together. No, this only what I learn of you. Receive ye the Spirit by the works of the law or by the hearing of faith. So let's drop down to verse 3. Are you so foolish, having begun in the Spirit, are you now made perfect by the flesh? The flesh are the works of the law. The flesh, they're the works of the law. And when we go to Hebrews, that's why it says here, Hebrews 7, because Christians use this. We go to what they use. They continue to use it, even the dumbest of them. They don't think we know. But we want you to see this. Hebrews 7:18. For there is verily a disannulling of the commandment going before the weakness and unprofitableness thereof. Watch this. For the law made nothing perfect, but the bringing in of a better hope did, by the which we draw nigh unto God. We draw nigh. Which law made nothing perfect? We have to research that. You got to tell us, show us, Christians. They won't do it. They'll sit there and look at you in your face. Why? Why? We'll do it. Hebrews 10:1. For the law, having a shadow of good things to come, and not the very image of those things, can never with those sacrifices. So the sacrifices was the law, which they offered year by year continually, make the comers thereunto perfect. So the law that made nothing perfect was the sacrifice that they brought year by year. That's the law that made nothing perfect, because we know that the 10 Commandments did. The book of John. The law, the sacrifice made nothing perfect. But watch John. 1 John 2, verse 4. He that saith, I know him, and keep not his commandments, is a liar, and the truth is not in him. But whoso keepeth his word, his word has nothing to do with the sacrifice. His word has not. We keep telling you, brothers and sisters, his word has nothing to do with the sacrifice. Nothing. These Christians play this game. But whoso keepeth his word, in him verily is the love of God perfected. So this law does perfect you. The word perfects you, not the sacrifice. Come on now. But whoso keepeth his word, in him verily is the love of God perfected. Hereby we know that we are in him, if we keep the law. So that's the law that didn't make you perfect. So when we go back to Galatians, and give me a second, brothers and sisters, let me take a quick break. I have to. All right, brothers and sisters, I had to take that break. Thanks for staying with me. But as you can see here, 1 John 2:5, but whoso keepeth his word, in him verily is the love of God perfected. It's the word that perfects you, not this. Let's go back to Hebrews. Chapter 10. Notice this again. But whosoever keepeth his word, in him verily is the love of God perfected. He becomes perfect through the word. Book of Hebrews 10:1. For the law, having a shadow of good things to come, and not the very image of those things, can never with those sacrifices only Israel done. That's why these jokes don't want to teach it. They know only Israel done the sacrifices. Other nations have nothing to do with this. We keep telling you. Which they offer year by year continually, make the comers thereunto perfect. The sacrifice could not make you perfect. And the sacrifice was what? Let's see what the sacrifice was called. Again, 1 Corinthians 10:18. 1 Corinthians 10:18. But Israel after the flesh, are not they which eat of the sacrifices partakers of the altar? Sacrifices was called the flesh. Sacrifices was called the flesh. That's why when we go back up to Galatians 3, verse 2. This only would I learn of you. Receive ye the Spirit by the works of the law, or by the hearing of faith? Watch this. Are ye so foolish, having begun in the Spirit, are ye now made perfect by the flesh? The flesh was the works of the law. When he says, are you now made perfect by the flesh, he's saying, are you now made perfect by the sacrifice? The flesh was the sacrifice. The flesh was the sacrifice, letting you know that the works of the law was the sacrifice. So when we drop down to verse 12, when he says, and the law is not of faith, he's talking about the sacrifice. But the man that doeth them shall live in them. The man that liveth in sacrifices, that doeth sacrifices, shall live in them. The law he's talking about here is what he was talking about in verse 2 and 3. That was the flesh. The works of the law. Again, one more time, then we're going to go one more place. Galatians 3 and 2. Only this would I learn of you. Receive ye the Spirit by the works of the law or by the hearing of faith? Are ye so foolish, having begun in the Spirit? Are ye now made perfect by the sacrifice? That's the flesh. Sacrifice. The flesh is the sacrifice. And it was the works of the law. We know what the works of the law was. Animal sacrifice. So when we drop down, and the law, which was the animal sacrifice, is not of faith, but the man that doeth them shall live in them. What did he mean by that? Let's get 1 Corinthians 9 again. 1 Corinthians 9. When he says shall live in them, what does he mean? The man that doeth them shall live in them. Let's find out what that shall live in them means. Watch this. 1 Corinthians 9:13. Do ye not know that they which minister about the holy things live of the things, live of the temple? Remember, it says, look, do ye not know that they which minister, which is work about the holy things, live of the things of the temple? And they which wait at the altar are partakers with the altar. When it says live in them, they lived in the things of the temple. They lived in the laws of the temple. They lived in them. They done the works. That's how they lived. That's how they made their living. So when we go back to Galatians, the law that is not of faith, brothers and sisters, the law that is not of faith is sacrifice. We've proven it. He is saying it. That's the law that is not of faith. That is the law. Sacrifice is the law that is not of faith. And the law is not of faith, but the man that doeth them shall live in them. Doeth what? The works of the law, which is sacrifice. They live of the things of the temple. That's the law that is not of faith. It's not talking about the Ten Commandments, because there's no way, brothers and sisters, Paul can say this in the book of Romans, chapter 3. Remember now, the book of Romans, chapter 3, in verse 27, Paul doesn't contradict himself. You just have to study what you're looking at. It says, where is boasting then? It is excluded. By what law? Works of the law. The works of the law. Nay, but by the law of faith, because the works of the law were not of faith. It wasn't. When you see that works, that's works of the law, which is what? Sacrifice. We've proven it. The flesh. That works is the flesh. Nay, but by the law of faith, because the flesh, the works, was not of faith. That is what's not of faith. But the law is of faith. Like you see here. So what I want to do, I went on that rant for a reason. I wanted to put this in perspective. Going back to Romans 14, verse 23. And he that doubteth, he that is an unbeliever, is damned if he eat, because he eateth not of faith. An unbeliever is not eating of faith. And an unbeliever is a sinner. Unrighteousness. See, this is why you have to understand the wording. You can see what it is when you know the wording. 2 Corinthians 6:14. Be ye not unequally yoked together with unbelievers, for what fellowship hath righteousness with unrighteousness? The unbeliever is the unrighteous that commits the unrighteousness. And all unrighteousness is sin. 1 John 5:17. And what communion has light? Light was in the law, darkness, sin. So an unbeliever is a sinner. So when we go back up to first, you got to think. Know what these words are. You got to break these things down, because why is, this is how confusing it is. Romans 14, verse 23. He that doubteth, that is an unbeliever, a sinner, is damned if he eat, because he eateth not with faith. Because he doesn't eat, he's damned because he eateth not with faith. For whatsoever is not of faith is sin. Why? Because faith is a matter of the law. Matthew 23:23, Romans 3:27. Faith is a matter of the law. Faith is a matter of the law. And when you broke, we're going to do this again. We're going to do this again. Psalm 78. Verse 56. Yet they tempted and provoked the Most High God, and kept not his testimonies. When it says kept not his testimonies, it means they sinned. Kept not his testimonies is sinned. Kept not his testimonies mean they sinned, but turned back and dealt unfaithfully. So when they kept not his testimonies, which is sin, they were unfaithful. Look at it again. Yet they tempted and provoked the Most High God, and kept not his testimonies. That means they sinned. They kept not his testimonies. Not means sinned, but turned back and dealt unfaithfully. See, when they sinned against God, they were unfaithful. This is something people, they don't know this. And we promise you, brothers and sisters, we promise you, it did not change in the New Testament. Let's go to 2 verses and then our last verse. Let's get the book of Psalms 119. We want you to see this. Psalms 119. Psalms 119, verse 53 again. Horror has taken hold upon me because of the wicked that forsake thy law. The wicked that forsake thy law. So the wicked forsake the law. They can't change it. The wicked are those that forsake, which is transgress the law. So the wicked transgress the law. So let's look at 2 Thessalonians 3:2 again. 2 Thessalonians 3, verse 1. Finally, brethren, pray for us that the word of the Lord may have free course and be glorified, even as it is with you, and that we may be delivered from unreasonable and wicked men, sinners. For all men have not faith. Brothers and sisters, let me tell you something. A wicked man is a sinner. And Paul says, for all men have not faith. A wicked man has no faith. A sinner has no faith. This is what that verse is saying. That we may be delivered from unreasonable and wicked men, transgressors of the law. Psalms 119, verse 53. For all men have not faith, meaning sinners, they don't have faith, according to this verse. That's what it means. Wicked men have no faith. Sinners have no faith. See, when you know what the wicked man is by the Bible, a transgressor of the law, now you see, for all men have not faith. Men that are wicked have no faith. So a sinner has no faith. But the Christians will have you believe that you can transgress the law and have faith. That's the problem. That's why Paul says in Romans 14, verse 23, that's why he said this. And he that doubteth, he that is an unbeliever, is damned if he eat, because he eateth not with faith. Faith and belief is the same thing. For whatsoever is not of faith is sin, because faith is a matter of the law. Faith is a matter of the law, Matthew 15:23. And there is a law of faith. That's why. That's why Paul says, whatsoever is not of faith. There is a law of faith. There is a law. Brothers and sisters, when you see, this is why he said, whatsoever is not of faith is sin, because where is boasting then? It is excluded. By what law? Of works? The works are the works of the law. Sacrifice. No, but by the law of faith, because the law is of faith. That's why Paul said the law is of faith. Again, that's why Paul says in see these Christians, it's 14:23. For whatsoever is not of faith, which is the law, is sin. So when they try to trick you with that, now you can see that the doubter is the unbeliever, and he's damned if he eat, because he eateth not with faith, because he is a unbeliever, a doubter. For whatsoever is not of faith, the law is of faith, is sin, is still transgression of the law. Since faith is a matter and of the law, is still transgression. That's why he says is sin. Don't let these Christians trick you into thinking that, oh, you guys, because they use, this is what we're showing you the plot. We're showing you the plot. When you look at Galatians 2:16 one more time, and then we're gone. This is the plot. That's why we showed you Galatians 3:12. See, when they read, they put all these together. See, brothers and sisters, they have a certain amount of verses that they clump together and run them by you. You got to stop them. That's why he says, knowing that a man is not justified by the works of the law. See, they don't identify works of the law, but we did. That's sacrifice. But by the faith, see, it wasn't by sacrifice. It was by the faith. And faith, see, works of the law. Remember, works of the law. But by faith, works of the law. But by faith, works of the law. But by faith. Again, we're going to come back to this verse. Romans 3:27, one more time. See, works of the law, but by faith. Oh, let's look. Where is boasting then? It is excluded. By what law? Works. Stop. Works. The works of the law is what Paul is talking about in Galatians 2:16. No, but by the law of faith. So there was a law of works and a law of faith. That's what we're telling you. Just because he says faith doesn't mean it's not incorporated with the law. It still is. It's just not the law of sacrifice, which is the works. So you see faith and you be like, oh, well, faith is different than the law. No, there is a law of faith. There it is, law of faith. Christ told you in Matthew 23:23 the same thing. And those that broke the law had no faith. We read that. Psalm 78, verse 56 to 57, 2 Thessalonians 3:2. Wicked men don't have faith. So you got to think of it. You got to think there is a law of faith and a law of works. Two. That's why when you go back, two laws is mentioned in this verse. That's why when you see the book of Galatians, You got to straighten these things out. Galatians, again, 2. See, law of works, works of the law, nay, but by the law of faith. So there was a law of works and a law of faith. We know it. That's why it says, Galatians 2:16, knowing that a man is not justified by the works of the law. That's the flesh. Sacrifice. But by the faith of the Messiah Christ. But by the faith of the Messiah Christ. The faith that is of the Messiah Christ is in the law. Like it says in Matthew 23:23. When it says, but by the faith of Christ, let's not forget, brothers and sisters, Matthew 23:23. Matthew 23:23. Woe unto you, scribes and Pharisee hypocrites, for you pay tithes of mint and anise and cumin, and have omitted the weightier matters of the law, judgment, mercy, and faith. The faith of Christ, the faith Christ is talking about. The faith Christ is talking about is a matter of the law, brothers and sisters. It's a heavy matter of law. The faith Christ is talking about is a heavy matter of law. So the faith of Christ is in the law. You see it. The faith Christ described was a heavy matter of law. Faith was not without the law, like these Christians are trying to separate it. Christ said that faith was in the law, or a matter of the law. Go back to Galatians. They're not going to sit up here and play these games. Galatians 2. Verse 16. Knowing that a man is not justified by the works of the law, but by the faith of the Messiah Christ, which is a matter of the law of faith. Even we have believed in the Messiah Christ that we might be justified by the faith. What was the faith of Christ in? The law of Christ, and not by the works of the law, the sacrifice. For by the works of the law, which is sacrifice, the flesh, shall no flesh be justified. That's the law you're not justified by. The flesh. That's the works of the law. Proven. Galatians 3:2, this only would I learn of you, receive ye the Spirit by the works of the law, or by the hearing of faith? Are ye so foolish, having begun in the Spirit? Are ye now made perfect by the flesh? The flesh is the sacrifice. The flesh is the sacrifice. We're going as slow as we can on this, brothers and sisters. The works of the law is the flesh. And again, behold, Israel after the flesh are not they which eat of the sacrifices partakers of the altar. The flesh is sacrifice. The flesh is sacrifice. The flesh is sacrifice. It's the same. You cannot be made perfect by the sacrifice. So those works of the law he was talking about in Galatians 2:16. Are ye so foolish, having begun in the Spirit? Are ye now made perfect by the flesh? The flesh was the works of the law. And it was sacrifices. So when Paul says, whatsoever, we're going to do this one more time. That was the key. They were trying to remove faith from as a work. No, it was something. They never did identify what the works of the law was. We now know. He that doubteth, or an unbeliever, is damned. So the unbeliever is damned if he eat, because he eateth not with faith. Faith and belief is the same thing. For whatsoever is not of faith, which is a matter of the law of Christ, Matthew 23:23, Romans 3:27. So whatsoever is not of faith is sin, because faith is a matter of the law. And Paul agreed in Romans 3:27, the law of faith. That's why it is sin, because faith being a matter of the law, if you break it, you're a sinner. So this is no different. This is no different than 1 John 3:4. It's saying the same thing. If you transgress the law, you're a sinner. Because when they broke God's law, they were unfaithful. When they sinned, they were unfaithful. Psalm 78:56-67. Psalm 78:56-57. And 2 Thessalonians 3:2, not all men have faith. Who? Wicked men. So transgressors of the law have no faith. So if transgressors of the law have no faith, this is why he says, for whatsoever is not of faith, which a sinner goes against, is sin. Because a sinner has no faith. That's why he said it. Whatsoever is not of faith is sin, because a sinner has no faith. And with that, brothers and sisters, we hope you got something from it. All praises. We'll be back with you soon. Take care. Let us continue in the faith, the true faith. All praises.